everybody, and welcome to the Techegy podcast. This is a Techegy Interviews, and today we are interviewing Daryl Dudey from United Kingdom, correct?
Yeah.
So Daryl has created DARIC, which is a programming language inspired by microcomputer basics of the 1980s, but built on modern foundations. Daryl, thank you for being on the podcast. We absolutely appreciate your time, and we're very excited to talk to you about this. Actually, MC introduced this to myself, and then it kind of spread through our group, and we had a couple other members that weren't able to be on, but everybody is looking forward to this. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your history, and we'll just get into it.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks for having me. Good to be on here. Obviously, everybody loves to talk about their pet projects. So a little bit about me as far as what DARIC goes is I'm a little older and kid of the 80s with the microcomputers. Started off with, I got Sinclair's ZX Spectrum in probably 82, 83, and a very popular machine over here in the UK. Started off playing games like most kids do, and got into programming slowly but surely. Basic first, and then eventually got into machine code, Z80 in there. Got into machine code. Great fun, loving the programming, but Spectrum was a slightly limited machine, tape-based, which for those who have machines with tape drives is a nightmare. It's not so bad for loading games, apart from the 10-minute wait, which drives you crazy. But for programming, you enter your program, you save it onto tape, you have to load it back, and if obviously the machine crashes, you've got that whole load cycle. It just takes forever. So I started off with a Specky, as it's affectionately known, and a few years after that, probably mid 80s, 85, 86, I was lucky enough. Well, I think my father actually felt a bit of pity for me. He bought me a BBC Micro, BBC Master 128 with twin floppy drives over here, which was an amazing machine for programming. The inbuilt basic was fantastic. Came with actually got an inline assembler as well, which is pretty cool. But you can also get Forth and Lisp, and there's a whole bunch of others. C, Pascal, I think OCaml was on there as well. So that was the machine that really ignited my love for programming. That was great fun. And that's where I guess DARIC came from. I'll come back to that in a minute. After that, I wanted to get an Acorn Archimedes machine, which was the shiny 32-bit RISC machine over here, but very, very expensive. And didn't happen in the end. So I did it with the 286 and then went through 286, and I learned that thing to death. Still got the books over in a cabinet behind me here. So I did 286 assembly language, all the various programming systems, and then went through 386, 486, all the way through the different machines, obviously getting more and more powerful, up till about 2010 when I got a Mac, and I've never really switched back from that. But I did have a stint doing Linux as well. So I've kind of covered all the major operating systems there. Throughout all the machines I had, programming is the thing really for me. I think once you get that bug, it's very difficult to stop doing it. So here I am many years later, still doing that same thing. As far as DARIC came from, so it's a basic. And I think the point is these days we've got an amazing wealth of software and stuff like that. As far as programming languages, we've got Python and Ruby, and there's an endless list of coding languages available. But in some ways, they're a little annoying because back in the 80s, you had a machine, you switched it on in the back, and you instantly got that basic prompt. You could start typing away. You could type your programs, instant gratification. In the 80s here, there's a whole load of programming books. There's input magazines. I mean, they're over there. I'm not going to dig them out, but there's input magazines that had these typing listings, and you could figure things out from that and change the coding. And I always feel that's sort of been lost somewhere along the way, because these new programming systems are great, but they're not. I mean, Python's great, but you can't just load Python up and draw lines on screen or whatever. You've got to import libraries. It's loads of faffing around really to get it to a point where you can have fun. So I did have a phase. So DARIC is inspired by that immediacy. Start typing, run stuff straight away. But I also there was a Blitz programming system at one point. Blitz Max was really, really good. So that was a compiled basic, which was great fun. But that sort of it's still around, I think, in a form, but it ended up changing. So I got a few years ago getting. So I do games, demos, graphic stuff. That's the thing that excites me, and it's just so much hassle. It's just so much hassle. So I thought, okay, I started off. I think 2019 is I'll build my own little system. So it started off being a 3D programming engine, if you like, for an existing basic. But over time, it changed. These things always change. So at first, it was this interpreted language, same as the basics of old, but now it's turned into something completely different. So the whole point, I guess, of DARIC and the whole ethos is instant gratification. Type some code, see it doing something straight away. It's that fun aspect. No need to go get libraries. Everything's there straight away. So that's my programming background. As far as work goes, yes, I've done programming. I'm not a developer. I'm actually in sales, but I do a bit of coding as part of that. So I'm a technology coding guy through and through. That's a bit of background, I guess, of why we're talking today. I can see the fern behind.
Yeah, I took a few screenshots of your program, and it amazed me running some of them sample programs you got in there. Now, I'm interested in BASIC because I had a color computer and I love their extended BASIC because you just say line and give the coordinates, or circle and give the radius and stuff, and you could just draw stuff like that. When I saw your BASIC, I haven't looked at it enough to know, but I was able to read some of it and actually understand some of it. So I was kind of impressed with the graphics you were able to do with, basic coding. It impressed me. So, that's why, I have some questions. What systems is all this, that they're going to run on? What are all the systems you're going to program it for?
So the one thing I set out from the start really was that it's going to run on modern machines, because one of the most infuriating things back in the 80s was it took forever sometimes. So you think of fractals, that fractal behind you, you'd be sitting there for 20 minutes or longer, and it wouldn't look anything like that. And that was a little frustrating. So I was like, okay, I want it to be quick. So a lot of basics are interpreted, but DARIC is compiled, uses LLVM in there. So if you download it, the compiler, etc., they're pretty big binaries. Very little of that is my code. Most of that is the libraries I'm using. So LLVM is the same stuff as Clang and a bunch of other compilers use. So that's hardcore optimizing compiler technology, essentially. So it's all 64-bit. Everything in there is 64-bit, integers and floating point numbers. The graphics, it's SDL, pretty standard stuff. It's SDL for graphics. There's some 3D in there, and that's all it's OpenGL at the back of it, but it's my sort of simple 3D engine. So the whole point, I guess, simplicity is a good way of putting it. So you've looked at the code. It's intentionally simple. The language itself is simple, really. I didn't add too many clever things. So the code is relatively easy to understand. That was the point of it. Yeah, I can see there you go. So that is my head model. I got it from somewhere. I can't remember where now. So that's
not your head?
Not my head. But that is loaded in. That's a 3D, not a 3D Max, because I think it's wavefront obj 3D file format, which is pretty easy to understand. It's a text format. So I load that in with DARIC in that case. So there's it's like 30, 40 lines of code that read that in from the file and then create this 3D model. And again, the whole point is in DARIC itself is it's simple keywords. So there's a keyword that is vertex. There's a keyword that is face. There's one that creates a shape. There's one that creates objects. All very, very, very simple. So it's making it accessible, I guess, is the point. And then because of modern hardware, that thing spins at 60 frames a second or 100 frames a second or whatever it does. You get all that benefit of a GPU that we have today, which let's be honest, they're crazy powerful, aren't they? But 3D was not the goal of it as such, because if you want to go and create a game in 3D, you use Unity or whatever else, and they're complex beasts. So this is all about keeping it nice and simple and accessible.
Yeah, I do have a question. I tried to write some basic and just what basic I know, which isn't the same as yours, but I just tried print hello world. and it did nothing. And I was wondering if you're going to have some kind of like error detection or debugging where it gives you an error that you're doing something wrong, you know.
That's a good point. So the thing you probably hit now, I've done recently is in today, yesterday. I have done a slightly updated version. So the original on the website was version 1, and there's now 1.1, and that's actually catches some of those things. So if you put in a print statement now, so for print to work, it's got to open a graphics mode. It's got to open a window so you can draw some text or whatever in there. Prior to this version, it just did nothing. It looked like it wasn't working. At least now it'll come up. So there's 2 modes it runs in. One of them is like a development mode, and it will open up a default window to draw into. So if you put print, it'll print something in a window, and then it'll wait for you to press a key. So the version you had just exited straight away.
Yes, that's what it did. Yeah, that's what it did.
So now it waits. It says press a key, tells you how long it took to run it.
Yeah, I think I have your version for like 2 weeks ago or whatever.
Yeah. So it's been updated since then because I got some feedback. So I posted it on the Facebook group and got some good, useful feedback, and incorporating all that into there. So there's these 2 modes. There's a development mode which helps you a little bit, and then the release mode. But even in that release mode, it'll chuck back an error now and say you need to open a graphics mode.
Okay.
Yeah, I just did it, and that's exactly what it did. I've got the 1.1.
Yeah, and it'll give you an error on that. So there are some things. Print works as before. There's no line numbers, and there's no go-to. The purists out there are going to get really annoyed. It's not really basic if it's not got line numbers. But I guess all those intervening years when I programmed is structured programming and object-oriented program, whatever else. Now, DARIC isn't object-oriented. There's a whole discussion there about whether I'm going to add that in or not. Maybe not, but it's all structured. So you can't do 10 print something, 20 go to 10. That won't work. There's no line.
I tried. That's exactly what I tried.
But you can put it, but if you can put it in a loop, repeat until false, and that will just run forever and it'll do exactly the same thing, but in a structured way. But you have to remember, I learned to program mostly on the BBC Micro. That had a structured basic. So it had line numbers, but the later versions, it's optional. So that's the kind of model I used.
Interesting.
Which is just, it's a step above. And you can get, I created I've got some project, but there's a graphical demo I've done there. I call it Darch because there's a Zarch game over here, which was on Archimedes. And that's all running, runs pretty fast, pretty smooth. And that's got no line numbers and there's no go-to and there's no go-sub. So I haven't hit the limit yet. Now I have considered putting it in, labels and go-tos, but it's a living language. I'll add them if I need to.
But it has for and next and if and then, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's got there's a case statement as well, which is like a switch statement. So you can do some case variable of when it's this, when it's the other. So you can do, and a lot of the demos have got that code in there. The compared to the earlier version 1 had it as well, is I've actually got collections in there as well. So I've got lists, maps, sets. So there's decent amount of capability. And there's something called records, which is like a struct in C. So you can have this structure and it can contain all these other values. So you can do some pretty advanced stuff. But the whole focus is it simple? Is it obvious? I want nothing that's going to catch people out. There's no pointers or any other nasty stuff. You can't really get caught out.
Thank you, because I'm not, I'm the pure basic guy where, if it doesn't sound or say like it's a sentence, it's too hard for me.
Yeah. I mean, that's what that's basic is. It's easy to read, isn't it?
It is.
Modern languages got all sorts of symbols and punctuation.
Yeah. Too much punctuation,
Too much.
Yeah. What are you saving these files out as? Like, if is it going to go out as an executable, like an exe, or you have some kind of different extension, or?
Yes. Well, yes and no. So all the files just got a .DARIC extension. They're just text files, so you can edit them in anything. There is an IDE in there.
Well, I mean, if you compile it, or doesn't it compile? If it compiles, does it become an exe?
It will. So there is a compiler in there, but it's not that whole thing about simplicity. Yes, it is in there and it does work, but it's not. I'm not quite ready yet.
Okay.
To put it out of the world until it's watertight and it works every time. So yes, you can create executables for it because the compiler internally will output everything needed for a linker to produce an exe, and it all does it inside. There's no external dependencies. That's the point. I think with a compilation, if you're on a Mac, you might need to have Xcode installed, maybe, but on Windows, whatever, you don't need anything external to it, and it will create an exe. That's in there, and when it's working reliably, that'll be fine. It'll be a proper standalone executable. So it'll output this object file, there'll be a library file, it'll link the two together, and it'll be a standalone single file, a .exe. I think there's, because some of those exes could be, because of the libraries I'm pulling in, there's one in there, ASIMP. I don't know if I pronounced it correctly, but it's the Asset Importer library. And that's pretty hefty. That imports the 3D models. That's a good 20, 30 meg on its own. Okay. So I was just figuring out how to do a lightweight build so people get small. Because when I was in testing, I get executables of 50, 100K, which is tiny, isn't it? So there will be
definitely fast. I mean, it is fast. I was playing when I played with it. I did notice the compile wasn't up, to turn it into an exe yet. But running the demos and stuff, I was blown away by how fast.
It's super fast. The 3D head come up in like 2-3 seconds at most. Yeah. Not even that, maybe.
And you've got the whole compile step in there as well. So the goal is speed, because I'm not an impatient person, but I want to see the results straight away. I want to hit run, because the whole point is I want to hit run and I want to see something happening pretty quickly.
I am impatient, so thank you.
Yes, he is.
And I think I haven't targeted this at beginner programmers as such, because I don't know if they'd actually pick it up. I think it'd be people more like me to end up using it. But the idea is to give that instant feedback. It's fun. I mean, I reckon it'll compile some pretty big programs quickly. We're talking milliseconds most of the time.
Yeah, I got 2 more questions, John. You have any you want to shoot in there before I continue, or?
Everyone's really important, and it's a little bit off. It's on topic of this, but it's off topic of what we've been talking about. But the sloth.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was going to ask.
I'm sorry. The most important question of the podcast is what the sloth. Like, I need to know why the sloth is there. And for anyone who can't see, in his logo, there's a D and there's a sloth sticking from it.
This because I actually have a mug as well. That's got that's probably backwards to you.
Swag, as we call it.
Wow.
Yeah. And the t-shirt. There's only one of each.
Oh,
it's a collector's item.
That's limited edition for sure. Yeah,
it'll be worth a lot of money someday.
But the logo, that wasn't my idea. I was coming up with ideas. It could have been my wife's. Could have been. I'm blessed with a terrible memory, but it wasn't my idea. The logo itself was produced by a graphic designer, so it's a friend of ours, and she's done there's a whole branding going on. So I've got logos, color schemes, fonts. I got the whole lot.
Nice.
Because why not? At the end of the day, I suppose this is a bit of a bucket list project. So I want to go the whole hog. And the idea was, because it's been a while because of COVID sort of messed it up, but I used to go to things like Linux shows and whatever. And you have people with their tables set out. And I have done that once. 2019, I did do an early version of it. It was great fun. You get to meet people and get the feedback. But the ultimate goal is to be able to set this table out and have a boxed version of it. So DARIC in a box, like the old school. So I have started a book. Now I'm not a writer, so it's probably going to be terrible by substandard. But the idea is it's going to be 100 pages, 200 pages of ring bound. Yeah, A5. I don't know what the American equivalent is, but fairly small sort of book with ring bound, so it stays open on the page you're looking at. And it's going to have coding examples and just as important, it's going to have other reference stuff. So that comes back. Somebody mentioned documentation. Mm-hmm. Yes, need to do it. I have started. So version 1.1 has got initial. I at least document the functions and whatever in there. So the little panel on the right hand side that lists all of the 2D, 3D import file, and it gives you the parameters. And then over time, I'm going to add some descriptions stuff in there. So I've got quite a bit of that done, but there's only so much time in the day. But that is the goal. I would like it, DARIC, to become something that doesn't change, if that makes sense. So it's going to get to a point that it's essentially done. Yes, there'll be new libraries and things added to it, but the actual language itself stays the same. So if you write a program now, in 5 years' time, it should still run. So that's the goal, really, is to have it being a thing in a box that I could sell somebody with a book to give a bit of that nostalgia, I suppose.
Well, those days are so gone. I mean, I even, buying, we can't even really buy a copy of Windows in a box anymore, or Mac OS in a box anymore. It's just, you can't do it. I remember when Red Hat used to have boxes on the shelf. That is cool. That's very nostalgic because, again, you don't see that anymore.
No, I think the language itself not changing is part of that as well. It's a thing. So back in the 80s, those of us who had machines in the 80s, you could learn the thing inside and out. If you were programming, you could learn it inside and out. You could learn everything about it, and you knew it, and it didn't change. The machine didn't change. It was a fixed thing. There was no downloads and updates or whatever. It was a fixed thing, and there's something nice about of that sort of unchanging in a world of where everything software is always changing, and you wrote some code, you do an update, and then it doesn't run or whatever else, and because they've deprecated some feature, and that's, I mean, I have to put up with my professional life, but my pet projects, no. And I think we're mostly there with DARIC. I think just libraries from this point on, because I do want an end to it. Well, we say that, don't we? And then it's a big feature, like object-oriented. I don't know, but we'll see.
I could always do DARIC too.
Could do a DARIC too.
Extended DARIC. Yeah. Extended DARIC, like extended computer basic.
Special edition. Yeah.
I did think about having two versions of it. I'm trying to figure out where I'm going to go with this thing. But it would be, like the base model, and then all these extra bits and pieces. Because the idea of using it for work would be interesting. Okay, right now you can't. Right. But if it had connectors for databases and things, that would be interesting. I mean,
it's, be interesting to see where you could take it, like game design, because there's kind of like, another group in your, in your country, the Raspberry Pi Foundation, with the way they've up until COVID, you were able to get a computer pretty cheap, for, what the original design is for children. I mean, it's definitely changed a lot since then, but, as these new programmers are coming up, something like DARIC would be, I could see a real demand for something like that, or a real desire to learn something that, is available like this right here, where, again, the simplicity of it, but you still are having to understand the logic of the programming piece.
Exactly. And you mentioned the Pi. That is interesting because the DARIC did go through some iterations. And one of the versions, the earliest version, was called Pi Basic.
I saw that, and I was in that. Yes. You just reminded me. I was actually going to ask about that.
Because I thought that would be perfect, because the Pi is cheap and it's plenty powerful enough. Plenty powerful. It'll run this sort of stuff. And there's going to be a version for the Pi that had that, because I bought the Pi 400, I don't know, a couple of years ago now. Everyone's got a few Pis probably. I've got a Pi 400, and it comes with a book, Introduction to Programming book, which is somewhere in here. Now, Python's a great language, yes, but it isn't quite as accessible as it could be, because you've got to import this and you've got to import that, and I think that just muddies the waters. I mean, surely, even today, it would be nice to hit the keyboard and go line, plot a pixel, draw, and DARIC can do that. It can draw sprites. So in DARIC, in about 5 lines, you can open a screen mode, load a sprite, draw a sprite. That's it. It's just a few lines of code, and it's all in there. There's no external dependencies. It's just fun. And I've got a sort of family friend's son has been playing with it, and he loves it. I think he's 13. He thinks it's great, because I think it's accessibility.
I think it's going to open up to a lot of people, because C programming is kind of tough, and assembly language is tough. Basic is easier for a lot more people to understand than C and stuff like that. So I'm excited about this, to be honest. So
I think as well, as when I was part of the thing when you're designing something like this is the bits to leave out as well as to keep in. So for variables, it's just integers, it's just floating point numbers and strings. That's it. There's no, well, there's a byte type, but that's more for loading things into arrays. But I won't bore you with the details of that. But there's basically just 3 data types. Nice and simple. You don't need any more. A character is just a string that's got 1 letter in it. 1 character. That's it. Keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate it.
Yeah. So I do have 1 or 2 more questions. Resolution, screen size. I noticed you had like modes or something. What kind of resolutions can you get from it?
Anything and everything, I guess. So the mode command is pretty flexible. So yeah, it's X, screen width, screen height, and then there's a flags parameter at the end. So you could put, I don't know, 800, 600, and then put 0 as the flag, and that will give you a full screen, 800, 600, in what I call classic mode. And that's important. So classic mode is you draw a pixel, it appears. You draw a line, it appears. There's also a flipped, bank switching type. So you got a front buffer, back buffer. So if you do animations, you can draw in the background and flip them. Pretty standard stuff. And you'll see in all of those examples that the mode command either will have, often a lot of them got windowed. So you've got resolution and then windowed, and then it just opens a window. Nice and simple. And if you do or banked, you'll get a window that's bank switching.
And that's what's behind me, right? These windows you created on the desktop, like.
That's right. So that is using. I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. That's DIM GUI library sits behind this. So those windows, and yes, you can do it direct code. It's simple at the moment, but you can create a window and you can render it into any of the windows, and they can actually be dragged out of the window as well, which I think is pretty smart. So you can create a window and then drag these sub windows out. And in that demo you got behind me, they all animate at the same time. Even though it's only single threaded, they all animate. It looks like it looks like they're all running in different threads.
Now I only know Color Computer Basic, but do you have like paging where, I know you said you have foreground, background, but you have like paging to overlap the sprites or, in a fast motion or something like that,
There is one of the things that's in there that I haven't quite done yet. So you can do sprite sheets are a common enough thing. So I've wrote games before and you get a sprite sheet. Sometimes it's horizontal. You have 16 sprites or whatever in a row, or it's an entire sheet. And what you can do is you can load that sprite and then draw part of that. So you could do animation by drawing this part, then this part, then this part, then this part.
Gotcha.
But there is also an unused thing in there. It's a bank number when you draw a sprite. At the moment, only 0 works. But the idea being is you can load things into banks. So this is going to come in the future. So you can load 24 frames of animation and then set it. So give it an animation speed. It will just do it for you.
Nice.
So think like an explosion. Yeah. It'll run through all the frames and gets to the end, and then you just kill the sprite or whatever. But yeah, so that's going to happen at some point. That's definitely, and there's the whole 2D. So 2D is definitely the focus because I find it more fun anyway. Is I'm looking at bringing in simple collision detection and whatever libraries. So that's all added onto the. So the language itself stays the same, and then I just expand out the libraries and add all this extra nice
collision detection. There we go.
That's nice. Yeah.
Because you can make a pretty nice game with some good.
That's what you need for games, right?
And honestly, don't need very much, do you? If you can draw sprites and if you can figure out when they collide, how I figured it out, I'll work out later. There's different ways of doing it, but that's you've got 80% of a simple game right there. And as far as volumes of sprites go, I've got a friend of mine who had 100,000 decent sized sprites going around 60 frames a second on a pretty meaty GPU. But because I think that's the goal is on all the stuff I've done so far, I haven't hit that limit. So I don't want to spend my time optimizing this and figuring. I just want to go, here's what I want to do and go and do it. And for most fun, simple games, it'll definitely do that.
That's all right because I'm a gamer. So John, what else did you got? Mike, you got some other questions?
So we talked about getting this together, the ultimate plan being to sell it in the box with, kind of the old school way with the pamphlets and the documentation and that. What do you see this language mostly being used for? Because I know you can do gaming. Is it just kind of like a general all-purpose language? Is there going to be like something specific, or
I suppose I can't entirely decide sometimes. So what I've done so far is the stuff. What interests me is graphics, sound. So it's got sound support in there. You can play samples and 64 channels sounds. You can play samples. It'll play MIDI music, which is actually quite nice. It also play mod tracker stuff. So the goal is really, I suppose you could say, games, graphics. A lot of the demos are graphics based. What I'm adding in is a UI type. So there's a button and a text field so far. Pretty simple stuff. So even relatively simple games, you want on elements on screen you can click. I think I might avoid well, I say that, but again, I don't know where I'm going to go with this. Building standard applications and things with it doesn't seem like an exciting use for it. And honestly, I think everybody's going to use something else anyway. So why not just focus? But it also, general purpose is a good way of looking at it. It's not a game maker.
Right.
It's general purpose language that just happens to have stuff that's useful for making games. That's the goal. So you got things like the Box2D library, which I would really like to integrate into this, which would be great for games. But that's definitely the focus.
Yeah, it looks like, but when I was looking at it and looking at the demos, it reminded me when you and I, we had a great conversation before this of the Amiga. I mean, the thing that seemed to hit me, screamed when I was loading the demos and playing with it, when we knew we were going to do this podcast with you, meet you, is it screamed Amiga. The moment I brought it up, it was screaming Amiga. That was my initial impression of it. It's like, wow, this thing right here is it looks like from that era brought forward.
Yeah. And that's definitely inspirational. Amiga I never used it. I have got an Amiga. There's an Amiga 1200 in here on the shelf, and that does still work, but I never use it. There was Amos, the basic that came with the Amiga.
I believe so.
Yeah, and that compiled down. So, yes, back in the 80s, I tried to program the games that I bought using the basic, and of course it's too slow. But now, that's definitely it, is being able to recreate those games simply in basic and be way fast enough, and without having to do assembly language and all that horrible nitty-gritty stuff that just gets in the way. And I don't have all the time in the world. So I've got a job and a family and everything else. If I can spend an hour and do something great, that's without having to spend time optimizing, that's perfect.
Have you done any games? I mean, I know we keep coming back to games, and this right here is something that can do a lot more than games. You can see it in the in the demos and stuff that I played with earlier. But have you actually programmed any games yourself?
I have. I never got to the point of actually releasing anything because it's that whole 80-20 thing. Well, you can get so far quite quickly. But then when you get to the final bit, the problem I had, the games I did, they were very complex, some of them. I guess I love maths. They were very complex and looked great, but not necessarily that much fun. It's an art form. I did buy some books. I've got some game design books and did read through them. So at some point, yes. I think DARIC's probably the first hobby project that I'm getting to a point of it's a thing. It's a real thing. So yes, I've got in my DARIC projects folder, there's about 3 or 4 different projects I'm working on at the moment.
I'm the same way though. There's projects that I started and it was like, oh, this is cool. You get to a certain point, it's like life takes you away, family takes you away, job takes you away, something. So I definitely can understand that. I was just curious because again, that's something that it's something that I want to do. Is and my background from a gaming perspective in playing was ColecoVision, and as we talk about bucket lists, we talk about things we'd like to do. One of the things I'd like to do before I'm no longer, around, is I'd love to program a game for that system. And it's something I've looked at. I've read some books on it. And again, you get to a certain point, the book goes over here, life puts itself front and center. I know MC has done a few of that himself. You think he's gotten a little further than I have.
Well, none of them are finished.
I think as far as, I think targeting retro machines might be, I mean, there's no reason why I couldn't. So I'm going for that retro experience. The one thing I want to put in there is to emulate low resolution screen modes, so you can make it look like a classic game. But it also comes back round to that whole compile to exe thing. Yeah. Because you don't want to be giving your source code. I mean, DARIC's nice, and you could distribute it with it, I guess. But the whole, here's an exe with all your images and everything else, and then you can just ship that out to people. That's definitely the goal. And retro inspired, yes. So wouldn't be surprised. I had in a previous version, I had the ability to emulate a low resolution screen with a limited palette. So maybe that will come back. The code's still there.
It's retro, man. It's classic now.
Well, it would be neat if you could, make the compilers where you could compile it for Sega or compile it for Atari or ColecoVision, or you know what I mean? That would be cool.
That would be cool. I did have thoughts around that. Again, that whole limited time thing, but that would
I understand. That would take forever to do, but
it probably wouldn't run very quick, I suppose. Those old machines didn't have a lot of
well, you're right.
Which I guess is why we're here now, because I like the fact that I can recreate some of those games I played in the 80s and 90s.
Right.
That were hand-tuned assemblies. I can do them in BASIC. That's great. And so, high resolutions, fast scrolling, tons of stuff on screen. Yeah, that's.
But you got the horsepower of a machine that can do it all.
And even something like a Pi. I mean, Pi has quite a bit of oomph, plenty for most things. So there's a Windows version, a Mac version. It's on the website. There will be a Linux one. It's built to be cross-platform anyway. That is currently being done. It does run under Linux using Wine. Mm-hmm. Somebody tried it out and it just run because it's not a complex. The compiler, it's very. I don't do anything fancy. It runs perfectly under Wine. So
nice,
very, very quickly as well. But there will be a proper Linux version as well, which is the Pi. So.
How much of a difference was there from the Apple version with the Intel silicon versus the Apple silicon? I noticed you have two versions. How complicated was that?
Not at all. So I've got in front of me here, I'm talking to you on my Intel iMac. It was the last of the Intel 27-inch ones.
Okay.
I got it because it was Intel, because I thought it'd be really, really important. Turns out I've also got a MacBook M1 Pro. That thing is quick. That's actually more pleasant to develop on. But as far as when I do a release, I just go to the Windows machine, build, compile. I go to the two Macs, build, compile, and I get 3 installers. It's that simple.
Yeah, I'm like you. I don't any longer, but I had a Intel Mac, but I was blown away by I've got a Mac Mini. How fast that machine was with the M1 chip. Again, it was like, wow. I was a little surprised.
They are very, very
and I'm not an Apple fanboy by any means, but I was blown away by how nice of a job that they did.
Oh yes, it's quick. They're very, very quick. But with DARIC, so the idea, I mean, I could do a combined Intel Apple Silicon version, but I've kept them separate. But the idea is, if when I do my games, and I'm going to do some games with this, is I can quickly just go onto each machine and compile, and I can end up with a game that I could ship out to everybody. That's a nice touch, because a lot of people I've discovered who would be interested in something like this run Linux. They're that kind of hobbyist, so that's pretty important to do that. I don't think I'm going to target anything else. Maybe I'll do some fun like retro one at some point, but that's the 3 platforms. I'm not going to go near the web because it doesn't interest me. I do that too much in my job.
It's amazing. It's amazing how you try to distance yourself from your work on things. I that's the reason I have an Xbox. I sit in front of a computer all day. You know, I try to get away from that.
Yeah, so exactly.
So we know where Derek's at now, but in the short term future, where do you see? I know you have very limited time with it, but where do you see Derek in the next 6 months to a year?
I think so. The last 6 months of last year was definitely making it something that could be shared with the world. So that was the goal, was to fix some of the bugs. And actually, I have not fixed a compiler issue in quite a while, so that's a good sign. So it's become pretty solid. I'll fix the usability stuff. The version 1 to 1.1 was fixing that, to make it easier to use, more fun to use. Now, once that settles down, like I say, I've got this IDE. It's not an IDE. It's not Visual Studio. It's a text editor, but I like the name. But I'll probably expand that out a little bit, add some help in there, maybe some sort of simple project management type stuff. Very simple, these files are part of this project, so you can build the project. But it's mostly going to be libraries. I think that's where I'm going to focus on. So there's the file IO stuff is simple, it's fine, but it could do with fleshing out. So I reckon I'm going to flesh all that out, fill in the gaps, and then declare it mostly done as what DARIC is. I've already started considering mentioned object-oriented, so I may, but I think I want to do that as something else. I don't want to pollute what it is by adding complexity, unless I can do it so that it's invisible and it's only there if you need it. But I don't want to risk it becoming more complex. And so that's where I am. So maybe there'll be a DARIC 2 at some point in the future.
What you're saying is by 2040 we'll have like DARIC 10.
Probably. But it has been nice to get to this point. It's a thing. It's a real thing. It really does work. People can use it. It does work. So as people figure out problems and bugs, we talked about the one where the window, you don't see your print statement working. So fix all those things, get it working pretty well, and then don't mess with it too much. I think is because that's happened to too many other. So I guess it was partly based on Blitz Basic. And then the creator of that jumped onto a new project, and he left it behind. And that's, I think, is always a bit of a shame, because the later projects had a different goal and it wasn't as nice. So that, I think getting to the point of it being a done thing, and that comes down to the whole box and book vision as well. And actually, and when you've got enough in there, you've got enough in there. So why keep expanding it forever?
So what you're saying is a year from now it'll be on sale.
Do people buy software anymore?
I don't know. We're gonna hold you to it a year from now.
it would be great. I think and I got my t-shirt. I've seen my t-shirt already.
I was gonna ask, have you so I know, so you're the only one working on it, correct? Like it's just you. Have you considered like Kickstarter or even just donations, and you have some limited edition merch, and by limited edition I mean one.
Possibly
truly limited.
I mean, I know I probably a lot of people are still learning about this. Like we had just found out, like the short conversation that we've had, I think what was like a week ago.
Yeah,
or a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks at the most. That
because I found it and I messed with it for a couple of days, and then
MC found it.
John, I said, "You got to see this program."
Yeah, and then it trickled down, and then I reached out to you actually before I had even touched it, and then I was like, "Oh yeah, no, this is super cool." And then everybody kind of got involved. So it's really interesting what you can stumble upon and what people are working on that you might never find out about. So
I'm just glad you let us.
Thank you, social media.
I think there's probably a lot of projects out there that don't get noticed.
Yeah.
I think in this case it'd be a shame, because I know it seems you feel the same, that this is something that is, it's fun. It works.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. It's a little different to things out there. Yeah, I mean, I don't know where to take it necessarily from here.
Well, I see it good for schools even. I mean, teach them how to program. I mean, they got that, what's that one called, starts with an S,
Swift?
I don't know. There's one they use in Scratch. Yeah, I think that's it. But I mean, this would be good for kids to learn in school. At least it shows them the if and, the for statements, the if statements, that, so I think it'd be good in schools.
start charging schools.
There you go.
Well, if anybody comes up with any ideas, I'm definitely all ears. Because I'm building it for myself. It's not just me. Yes, I'm the only one really programming it, but I've got other people who have helped with testing it and sorting out the Windows installer and things like that. So there are other people out there, but it would be great to have a community and for it to get used. That'd be amazing. But everybody wants that for the project, don't they? But
right. I think even making like your own Facebook group for it, I think would be appropriate. As it moves
I have one. I have one already.
Oh, do you?
We'll put the link in. We'll put the link.
Yeah. I just created it. It's empty at the moment. I think there's one comment in there, but I created that so there's a place because even on the website, there's no on the website. There's no links to click to say contact. Yeah. So yes, somewhere that people can post their comments. It'd be great to see some projects with it. That'd be amazing.
Yeah. Which, by the way, the website is dariclang.com. That's DARIC Lang LANG.com. We'll have it in the links. I sometimes put it down at the bottom of the videos too, so everybody sees it the entire interview, and then they're forced to go to it.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to find that Facebook page because see how this right here evolves because this is really cool stuff.
And and I'll also add that to the web page as well. So there's a link there that people can click into. And I'm pretty receptive, around life. But if anyone's got any questions or queries, everybody loves to talk about their own projects. I'm no different. But yeah.
Sure. Cool. Well, I think maybe are we out of questions?
I think we're good for now, and when he adds more stuff, we'll get him back on.
We'd love to have you back. This is cool stuff, man.
Yes, stay in touch. This is interesting. We always try to find people that are doing something different, and we always stumble upon stuff. Like we look and we never find anything, but then something pops up, and that's kind of just like the way that the fates have brought us in certain directions. And so this is definitely one of them. And I know we were all excited about it. So keep in touch. Any updates, feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to have you on again. Or if you just want to chat with us, just let us know. We can just talk offline. Good. Doesn't have to be recorded.
We'll talk to you. Give you ideas.
We have a game that we've been working on for like 7 years, Mike.
Oh yeah, it'll never be done, but we at least have high hopes.
So yeah, anyways, appreciate you coming on. Do you have anything that you want to plug for yourself? I know plug the website again. I think DaricLang.com.
I think plugging Daryc is enough. This is at some point it would be nice to come on. I think it'd be nice to come back on and have a game that I've created in it because I've got these ideas, cool. and it's easy to lose track of why I started this journey in the first place. And I started it because I was doing my game projects, and I did them in various languages, and they all have their pitfalls. So it's to remember that's why I did it, which is that whole bit about getting it to a point of it's done. I can now build some things with it.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, it'd be nice to come back on and have a
I'd love that because these guys know I'm a big gamer, so I'd be all into that.
Yeah, we're all pretty much big gamers.
We were.
Yeah, aside from like one of us, but
you've got the three main gamers. Yeah. On some of our other ones, we got some of the other gamers, but not as much retro. I think you've got the three real retro guys here. Again, it's kind of Mike and I lived it. And JC is reliving our childhood.
Yeah,
We're introducing him to the love of some of those games from the 80s.
I came in a little late in 1990, so I missed some of it. So sorry, everybody.
Yeah. It does remind me of a comment I saw somewhere. Is a spiritual successor, I guess, to BASIC, and the opinion was JavaScript. I was thinking, no, it's not. And this is the whole point of what it is. Everyone's saying, well, JavaScript comes installed on every machine. Yeah, okay. But it is not it is not. You can't just sit down in your browser and write a game.
No.
Nope. Nothing like that.
No, I took years of Java in college and I still don't. It's gone. I forgot about it. Well, Daryl, we appreciate you being on and joining us. It's been a great talk, and we are excited about the progress and the future of the DARIC programming language. And I hope to see that sloth again. I'm looking for hats. So
yeah, I do also have.
Oh, of course. I thought he was pulling out a hat. I was going to be like,
no.
You can put that on your head, JC.
I could put that on my head.
But it's been great to talk to you. Appreciate you inviting me on.
Yeah, awesome.